and we got people from Australia and Europe, so some people might be asleep, but we're just going to start. I am really excited to have Carla with me today. She has been a great friend, mentor. She is the board chair of One Solution. She is a force. She is an energy. She has this unique capability to bring love and presence and then direct, tangible truth, which most of the time.
That's the nicest way anybody has ever said how blunt I am. That's Eric's way of saying that.
Yeah. But if you guys remember the first session, we were talking about listening, and we talked about like the deeper levels of listening. You start to become capable of seeing the beautiful things, but also you're able to carry the uncomfortable things. That it's not always, doesn't always feel great to really see things for what they are. Sometimes when you see them, like, oh, I was better. It was better to just pretend that wasn't there. But once you see something, it's like either it's like, oh, this is amazing, or it's like, oh, this is a huge problem. Whether this is in our lives or in society, we tend to look at things and take in as much as we can. And the other things, once we realize the painful things, is like, oh no, now that I see this, it's harder to turn away. And I think that's the skill that you have, is you make things visible that often isn't visible to people, and you create a space where they're actually able to hear that. So that's, yeah. Okay.
Do other people hear the echo? Alexander, I'm looking at you. Do you hear the echo too, or no?
Is this better? Is this better? Can you guys hear this?
Alden, is that better?
Or this?
No, it's not better.
How about now? Oh no. Wait a minute.
So Alexandra, do you hear echo too?
It's fine when Eric is speaking, but when you're speaking, then it's more.
Okay. So how about now?
To me, it's fine.
Okay.
Okay, it's only Alden then. Okay, sorry Alden, yeah.
Okay.
Try logging in and out again.
Okay, we got a thumbs up. All right, so with that introduction, Carla, can you introduce a little bit of who you are and what you do? And then we'll go from there, which is a lot. I know you're laughing because you're like, oh, where do I begin? But if you start, then we'll go from there.
All right. Mbote, hi everyone. I will have that annoying thing of trying to look at you on the screen, but I should be looking here. But hi everyone. My name is Carla Coupe. My pronouns are she, Z, L, Ella. And I guess what do I do? On my resume, it says that I am an attorney and a diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, anti-oppression consultant. As Eric said, I am the board chair for this wonderful platform and container, as I like to call it. And I'm, I don't know, a mom of a biracial, non-binary, know-it-all that's called Layla, female assigned by birth, 12-year-old. What else did you want me to say?
No, that was great. That was great. I'm going to dig some more out of it, though.
Oh, well, okay.
So,
I'm a Scorpio, so
Scorpio.
I'm a Scorpio, and who human as I am, I'm a projector. So if that gives you any type of context as to how I say things, that is it. But yeah.
Got an Aries and a Scorpio together. So the topic today was healthy leadership and how we could uncover more of that in the world. And I want to start by talking a little bit about ourselves as leaders, and then we can go kind of looking at more at societal things and the things that we are maneuvering in that area. But, looking at you as how you believe what a leader should embody, or what you feel like needs to carry inside themselves when they kind of look out in the world, what are some of those things that you feel like you resonate with as a person?
I think for me, first and foremost, be that in your relationship with yourself, first and foremost, but also then with others, and especially if you are a leader. And I don't want to say leadership position because that's a whole other false narrative that we have in most cultures. But the first thing is honesty. You have to be honest with yourself. I do not trust you. I will not trust myself if I can actually be self-aware enough to know that I'm not 100% honest with myself. And that translates into anything external and anybody external from me. So I think that's the very first one. Honesty is the first thing, because that is kind of your stepping stone or your foundation to trust. Again, trust of yourself, right? Your own intuition, your own gut feeling, or whatever that may be. And then also in your relationship with others. I don't care if it's a romantic one, platonic one, business one, whatever that may be. But that to me has to be, the core, has to be the center. The other part of that is, because of that honesty, you know what your fears are. You cannot be afraid of knowing the things and looking at the things that you are the least proud of about yourself. Know your shadows, dance with your shadows, I'd like to say. Because as long as something is unknown, it will always be a trap for you. It will always be a weak spot for you. Not to use ableist language, but it will always be a dynamic, a thing that may surprise you and veer you off of your path, or of the trajectory that you have set for yourself. So you know how when we're in bed or anywhere where it's dark and you see kind of just the contours of things and shapes of things, and you're always like, what is that? And and you see monsters or something that looks kind of that gives you fear, but once you switch on the light, oh, it's the coat that's hanging the funny way off my door, right? You know now what these shapes are, right? And I think to be a powerful and healthy leader, you cannot be that unless you know what all these weird shapes that are in the darkness that are within you. You should know what they are and who they are, where they come from, because otherwise that will always be something that will be kind of a, not to sound technical, but a deficiency that could potentially be harmful to yourself or in how you lead others, right? So honesty, vulnerability, or being able to dance with the shadows. And the third one is really humility, right? None of us know everything, even when we're oh, you have a lot of expertise and I've been doing this for, I don't care, right? You have not seen everything in the world. You have not met everybody in the world. And so, Erik, you mentioned listening, you mentioned all that, but again, it's understanding that I don't care how many titles you have in front or after your name, you will always be a student. We are all constantly learning. So to think that just because you've been in an industry for a certain amount of time, or you've been decorated publicly in so many different ways, great, awesome, you're living your purpose or you're really good at something, but especially when we go and try to fix something, especially for somebody else, you are not the expert, they are, right? That community is. And so to be a leader means that sometimes you're the student and you sit your butt down, like we like to say here in Chicago in the South, what I need you to do is take all the seats, right? Take all the seats and listen to what I have to say, right? And oftentimes that can be even in your own community, right? When I was doing work, kind of bridging relationships between the local police department here and Black and brown communities, just because I'm Black did not mean that I was I'm the expert on both, and I can, and I was, defending police officers back then. I'm I can speak both languages, but was I, Was I part of these communities? Was I impacted by these communities? Do I count myself in these communities? Sure. But again, I learned a heck of a lot, right? I had to listen a lot from all, and even people who are normal residents or community members just like me. But again, it's understanding that yes, can we all bring our own energy and our uniqueness? Absolutely. That's what this life experiment and experience is about. But to assume or somehow trick ourselves into thinking that we are somehow, whether leadership was conferred upon us or we have assumed that position, it's really more about guiding others. And you can't guide others, like I said, unless you know yourself, know thyself, right, first. And understanding that in order to guide or hold space for others, you have to know them and you have to let them tell you what the most honoring and inclusive and equitable way of doing so would be. So those would be my 3 pillars.
It's so hard. It's so easy for me to lie to myself, though.
Oh, we're all great liars.
Yeah.
Especially to ourselves.
Yeah. So what, like with that in mind, when you deal with, like if we take it more into your work, when you see an opportunity for them to kind of go out of the shadows, to see some of to be able to face whatever they need to face. It's not something you tell them to face. It's just like they need to face something. What do you do to create a space for allow that to happen? Because that is scary for most people.
Yes. So usually when I listen well, and I just actually got off a call with a new client, and he kind of just kept going and said, I should be doing these things, because blah, blah, blah. And I stopped and I'm like, what are you afraid of? What's the fear behind that? And he's like, I don't think I'm afraid. I'm like, no, but you just said that, you're so proud of your brand. You're so proud of the work you do. But when you're in front of certain audiences, you basically shrink yourself. You use different language to explain it. And then, and you even feel yucky because you're not really talking and presenting and talking about your brand the way you want to. Why do you think that is? He's like, well, I don't want to alienate people. I don't want to piss people off. I'm like, okay, but can you control that? He's like, no. And I'm like, what can you control? Can you control how authentic you are? And it's understanding the fear of not being accepted, the fear of being rejected, the fear of being undeserving of people's money or business or relationship, right? Those fears there are not many fears that we all have, but we all have them, and they all dictate how we go through the day. Our ego, kind of the jerk driver of your brain, if you want, is there to protect us. That's its job, right? Like we always like to demonize it. It does its job very, very well. But we don't do a thing, and again, most of our society, most of our families, most of our cultures train us to listen to that voice more and centering that to that dynamic more than our intuition or our heart, because heart it's weak, it's this, it's blah, 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 right? Whatever. You can't trust it. It's like, who says who? But if we keep hearing that, then it's like, okay, yeah, I won't, But when facing your fears, when you understand, like, well, I show up like this or I talk like this because X, Y, and Z, usually there's a fear underneath. And when we track it down to that fear, then we can unpack, okay, well, is that fear a real fear? Is that actually a threat to you, to your reputation, to your money, to your person, to your body, whatever that may be? Or is it a perceived threat? Is it something that may or may not materialize at all, but you're giving this potential so much power that you are actually missing the moment right now. You're missing the opportunity right now, right? And I'm like, it's just you and me. Like, if you feel ashamed to say what that fear is, I'm not here to judge you, right? I can go first. I can give you a litany of my issues. Like, I have no problem doing that, I'm not here to, shame you. This is not an exercise of shame or of me being a voyeur or somehow. I'm not your therapist, but I do see how a very good person with a very noble mission or purpose or wanting to do good or wanting to have certain influence or impact holds themselves back by not being the most balanced or healthy leader that they could be. So if that's what you want, you will have to give yourself grace and be okay feeling awkward and uncomfortable, but understanding I'm not here as a threat. And the sooner you can kind of look at yourself, the sooner you can kind of come out on the other side. And again, I'm not saying that, oh, we talked about this once and you cured, healed, yay, I'm the best human ever, but it will give you more ease in centering and be like, this is who I fully am. If I'm honest with myself and with you, this is who I fully am. And now I have to lead these people, or I have to lead this initiative or this department or this brand. And I don't know if I'm the best. And usually the next thing is, I don't know if the best person, if I'm honest about who I fully am I really the person who should be doing this, right? Then there comes the doubt, right? And then we can work on that. Like we can say, well, and we can talk about vision and strength and all that and whatnot, but oftentimes most of us skip that initial part of like, let me be real with who I really am, right? And so as we skip that and we jump into these initiatives or as we lead others, it is very, like I said, dangerous, because then that's how we unintentionally cause harm, right? By not knowing ourselves fully, because then you don't really know. Okay, yeah, this is much more easy for me to do when I work with people or when I lead people, but you also should know what are things that are difficult for you, right? And I'm not talking skill, but I'm talking about emotionally, being able to connect, being able to listen, being able to sit in discomfort when you get called out. And how do you react as a leader when somebody's like, actually, you got that wrong, right? So it's those things that the sooner you make friends or at least acquaintances with where those fears come from where those internal dynamics come from, that you become externally a better leader. And at least that has been the case for me, and kind of what I tell other folks as well.
Thank you. There's so many things I want to follow up on. The main thing, if we're to dig deeper about that, fear and the discomfort in the spaces that you're on, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, racism, that space, how do you maneuver with people who don't see that maybe I'm assuming, when you do work with them, are they there voluntarily or are you there to talk with someone who might initially not have that openness?
Usually it's like the whole spectrum of folks, right? So usually when folks are like, yeah, come and do like a training on bias, microaggressions, or power and privilege, right? Usually, and this is the interesting thing, the people who usually send me those emails or set up these Zooms with me are not the CEOs, are not the executive directors. It's usually not somebody from the top, right? It's usually like, oh, I'm on a DEI committee, or I'm part of the Black or queer affinity group, and either we have been asked to find people to help us with these workshops, or we need them and we just need to go to leadership and say, hey, we want these, right? So usually in any given point in time, regardless of client, I will always have those who have been told they have to be there, those who have told others that they have to be there, so i.e. the leaders, but they are not there themselves often. But you always have folks like, why are we here? Why this is divisive? Why are we talking about this? That these people are just here to stir up more of the race stuff and the gender stuff and whatever. And then you have those who are begging the organization to engage with this because they're the ones suffering every day at work, right? Because of whatever intersectionality of identities that they have. You have those who look like me, have the same intersectionality as me. I'm like, oh, it's for the white people and the white dudes over there. I'm like, we also do it to each other. So you also need to still be participatory, right? So you have different folks who are on different self-awareness levels and on different levels of understanding why this should even happen. These conversations actually need to happen. And unfortunately, in most of the organizations, the leadership cannot even articulate why they think that their organization needs to go through. So they're like, oh, we just create this chief equity officer position, or VP of inclusion. I'm like, okay, so tell me more about this position. What is this position supposed to be doing in your organization? How much power and authority does this person have? Do they have staff? Do they have a budget? Why are they there for? And then it's like, oh, well, we saw that other colleague. Like, I'm like, oh, so if everybody jumps off the bridge, you're gonna jump too, like, being my mom. But it's a lot of this DEI stuff, right? Became more of a knee-jerk reaction and a lot of a brand risk if you did not have that. So especially since the onset of COVID, and after George Floyd and the racial reckoning, and then we have the Great Resignation, like all of these things together, taught corporate world, nonprofits, everybody, that if you're silent or if you're not having a DEI something in your organization, I don't care if it's an officer or a committee, you'd be in trouble, right? And not just from your staff, who have been probably telling you for years, but you just haven't been listening or not making this a priority, that these conversations have to be had. But not externally. I mean, I don't know how many of you are on social media or even may have caught this, but something will happen, in a southern state where a nurse goes to Walmart at like 8:03 a.m. and she's being racist or crazy or something, and by 4 p.m. we know where she works. People have already, sent emails and social media tagging the employer and saying, okay, you have this not so nice lady that is a nurse in your hospital, what are you going to do with her, and how have you trained the rest of your staff, right? So there is now a different visibility to our shadows, right? And that scares a lot of folks. So instead of often saying, okay, let me take a minute and really look at myself and understand, what these things are that people are so upset about, and like, do I have staff that is impacted by these things? What does that mean? And if I'm not impacted by that, what does that mean for me? Being a leader who has to lead or is leading people who are affected in different ways and impacted in different ways, and again, most leaders will want to skip that part and just go, oh, let's plaster a DI committee here, let's do put a diversity equity office over here, and I should be fine. I don't have to out myself. I don't have to show my shadows about this, right? That's the game. So usually when I work with organizations, and they're like, oh, can you come and do a training and workshop? I'm like, sure, but do I get to meet the head of your organization? Because I don't really go into somebody's house when they're not there themselves. Like, what's the point of that, right? So that's how I'm able to gauge how ready a leader is to be a leader, right? Especially if I don't get it. Like I wake up, I don't have to think about certain things. You wake up, you may have to think about certain things about how you even just leave your house, right? And if your experience is so foreign to me, or has never been something that I even had to think about, unfortunately, a lot of us who are in leadership positions then deflect the self-work that I have to do now to be a better leader, a supportive leader to you, by doing these like check the box things, right? Yeah. Because again, the ego's like, this is too scary. Don't look at me. Let's come up with all these other things, and then hopefully maybe people are going to leave me alone, right? Because I did what they wanted, right, or what they needed, but you still have no clue really why and what they really need, and you didn't do your own self-work in that regard. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I kind of veered off on a tangent.
The work we do when we work with basically the health of people and the well-being and the resilience and the challenging some of the things that we are believing in to create a better culture in organizations. What sometimes happens too is that the leader also have good intentions, and we have to spend so much time explaining the importance of, people are being in the room. And sometimes they come and they have an idea of like, well, I've done this and this is for like, it's good for them. And I was like, no, it's good for you. And sometimes it's hard for that because I think leaders think like I'm doing something for someone else. Right. Like they're in that mind space of like, not so much looking at myself. And leadership's biggest role is to help other people and give them what they want. So it's like this misunderstood idea of leadership where it's like external. Versus like, no, the best, when you change, whatever you do changes. And I think that's the very prevalent like misunderstanding that we have about leadership. That it's age, position, or it's for somebody, it's external.
Yes.
And I think once we shift that, it's like, no, it's internal. Even if you change nothing out here, when you change, you will be different.
Yes.
You will walk around different. People will pick up on that via osmosis. Yes. And it's the most leveraged thing. But that's hard for people to see. It's hard for people to accept sometimes. But I love how you put all those different stakeholders and putting them together and kind of like unifying them. Like we have to do this together. If not, if it's just this group over here, or if it's just checking boxes. Yeah. And it's the same in your field as it is in environment. Any field that's trying to like enroll people in something, it's like you have these people like, I get it, I don't get it, like what's the relevance here? And we just want to get on with our lives. Yeah. In a way.
And so that's why I always, and I don't know, maybe it sounds weird or whatnot, or manipulative, but not really. But when we're able to frame, being a healthy or balanced leader, what that entails, the self-work and all that, or when you have a whole organization with people at different ends of, or at different phases in understanding something, right, or their DEI journey, whatever it may be, you have to be able to speak to something that's important to them, even especially if the issue is something that's completely not part of their life or thought process. But you can always find, and that's where the listening comes in, right? That is where connecting to people, especially those that are that have a completely different intersectionality than us, because that will show you kind of how you can phrase or frame, hey, we all need to do this together, otherwise this is going to fail, right? But again, we all will have different reasons to connect to that, right? And unless you are aware of the different reasons in the room, you cannot be effective, right? Because you will only speak to, like, when they say you're preaching to the choir, the people who suffer microaggressions every day at work, they're like, yeah, of course we need to do this. Like, we should have been starting this, like, last year kind of thing, And then others who are like, this doesn't really concern me. I don't really suffer under this. So what's the urgency for them, right? But when you explain that, well, if you know that, half of your colleagues that are on your team come to work already stressed out and depleted and had to deal with like 2-3 other major life things before they even pop onto your Zoom screen or come into the office, how well do you think they're going to get their work done for this project that you're all on right now? Have you made as much progress as fast or effectively reach your objectives as planned? Like, how smooth have things gone? Right? How have you all been able to be around each other? Has there been a lot of like tension? Has there been a lot of, whatever, frustration and all that kind of stuff? And it's like, even if you don't care about specific communities or people in your organization, and because things are just too foreign, I'm sure you care about your work performance or your ability to achieve, finish a project or to finish an operational or other organizational objective. So let me get you in a little secret. If you take care of that, I guarantee you that this will change and this will be so much more better, so much better or faster or whatever that is. So again, I hate to still having to make the business case for DEI or for good leadership, but as long as we are in the frameworks and mindsets that we all have grown up with, that our parents have grown up with, and I mean, right now I think they're all kind of imploding and they're showing their cracks, and we got to get ready for the new frameworks that we are building. we're still in it now. And so the self-interest still has to be tied to bringing along a collective, right, that does represent different, has different sense of urgency, has different connection to, the very thing that you're trying to have them all kind of gather around so that they can go move together as a collective. So it's obviously a lot of dynamics, and I'm simplifying certain things here, but that's what it is, right? And as a leader, the more you listen, the more you understand what motivates the different people in your team, in your department, in your organization, and that is valuable, right? Yeah. And so that goes along with the listening, and again, understanding that you don't know everything. Yeah, you may know how to run your company perfectly, but you're running it, unless you have robots or AI, you have humans to deal with. Yeah. So you have to put the time in to have them open up to you, but they will not do it unless you do. So that's where that honesty, that vulnerability, that humility comes in, because they will only feel as safe as you make them feel, meaning you have to open up first often. And that's when you then understand who they truly are, what motivates them, what scares them, what are their shadows, right? So again, but again, it starts with you, and then you model it so that they understand it. Okay, it's safe to do that, so that because that information, that data, but more importantly, that energy, that connection, is what now builds a network of trust that is much more effective and efficient in then carrying out any type of organizational goals. So
it reminds me of two things. One, what the rebels said in the previous is like, you have to leave first. When you are open and vulnerable, they explain the kids will be open and vulnerable. And then it said, even if they're not, you have to keep doing it for a long time. Right. Like sometimes weeks, months, years, like they've done 3 years from 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, like 4 years of, and eventually, like something clicks.
Right.
And it also reminds me of this guy that works in regenerative agriculture, and he basically travels around the world meeting with farmers, and he explains like this is more in line with nature, and it will like triple your, like everyone's crops is like the soil is getting worse. Like this will actually help you, but still, they're like, I'm just gonna keep doing it, spray it, because it's like, well, I'm telling you, like this is better. You'll make more money. They will reinvigorate the whole, like everything, but still, it's like.
But that's the devil, This is the devil you don't know.
Yes.
This is the coat hanging from the thing, and it looks weird in the darkness, right?
Yes.
So it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Unfortunately, it makes human sense.
It's made human sense that we do that, and I want to hear if you ask them if there's any questions. You could type them up, or you could come on if you want. But I was curious about this, staying in this field for a long time, whatever field you are, where you meet, not resistance, but just what we're talking about. You meet that slow burn of change where you have to not get crazy, I guess. And we see this, in our work, and it's burnout is high, overwhelm, stress, apathy is at the end of it, or your body just shut down. Yeah. Is there anything you've experienced around that you want to speak to anyone who might be feeling that, or even just looking at the world and feeling like, I don't know even how to take this in?
Yeah.
What are some of the things you've seen to, I don't know.
I mean, I can just speak from my own experience. This summer, I hit my, sorry, I cuss a lot, but I'm like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, why the fuck are we? Like, I was telling my business partner, I'm like, Chipo, I'm fucking exhausted. Why are we doing this?
Yes.
And then I know some of you all are not here in the U.S., but we had some our highest court has handed down some crazy legal opinion that now has people, frantic about certain things. But I'm like, why are we even trying? Like literally
Yeah.
there's not just resistance in the clients that we work to, but now we have other systems saying, literally putting a bucket of ice water on the fire that we have built, over at least these last 2-3 years. And I was like, maybe I should just change careers. Maybe I just go back to academia, right? Because I mean, there's always going to be institutions and law schools. I can do that, Um, and then when things happened in the Middle East, I was just like, God damn, like it's just not letting up, right? And having conversations that we've had with client organizations where I mean, this is one of my vulnerable moments when when I do speak and do engage and try to learn and try to listen to folks from the Jewish community, which is often not easy and often with tension. But we were having conversations with collaborators and partners who help us co-facilitate, right? And we're like, damn, like this is really hitting everybody really hard, right? Like it's senseless, it's brutal all across, right? Um, and so you're kind of like, well, why are we doing this? Because literally every decade, every 2 years, there's something big happening globally. Yes. There's stuff happening daily at home, and my parents are from the Congo, so it's like it doesn't stop, right? And going back to the honesty, it's like knowing when you're burnt out, because if you're like, no, I got to push through, and I mean, that's how I was raised. No, push through, like just get it done, and blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, but when your inner equilibrium is so taxed already, how effective can you be? Us mothers, we have this conversation all the time. It's like, I'm exhausted, but my children need me, and I'm going to push through, and then. And then, I mean, we all have had our moms probably or people who have raised us snap on us, it's like, whoa, where did that come from? But it's because that person keeps giving without filling their own cup, right? And we all can have personal parallels to this. And then the being leaders is no different. So it is knowing when you reach that point. It is knowing, you know what, I'm going to stay off social media. I don't even want my colleagues to talk to me about this stuff right now. Give me like a few weeks or a week so I can just disappear and say, yeah, we got you, right? Like, and even organizationally, making sure that we understand that folks may be going through something that's, yes, in another country, another part of the globe, but they're affected here. So understanding that, okay, maybe for this, give them, and you can ask them, like, what do you need right now, right? Because how many of our workplaces after George Floyd was killed was like, okay, let's have a brown bag lunch about, the black community and police officers, and everybody looks to like the black teammates and like, okay, would you like to explain? It's like, hell no, that's the last thing that I need right now. Right now, I just need to be quiet in the back and everybody leave me alone, right? When all the reproductive rights things happens and all, like, again, it's understanding as a leader, understand when you are burnt out or when you're affected and the ones that you lead, so that you can then recalibrate and maybe reshuffle responsibilities or slow down something that those impacted have been working on, were assigned to, right? It's understanding that. But we have to, and this is something I hate about, I mean, there are a lot of things I hate about capitalism, but one thing about that is it does not give us the grace, the space, the grace to be burnt out. It leads us to that, right? Because it's metrics, it's performance, right? Especially here in the US. So burnout is inevitable. It is actually, no, let me rephrase that. Burnout is inevitable. You can actually run your business, lead your collective in a way that will not lend itself to anybody being burnt out, right? Like, yes, are there things from the outside world that will impact how your organization or your collective is able to navigate through a moment? Absolutely. But what you can do internally is have a culture of awareness, is centering wellness, is understanding what the workloads are of people, right? And who can maybe assume a little bit more just for the time being until other folks can kind of reclick, recharge, and a little bit more balance. But there has to be the talk about it. And a lot of people, especially when I work with law firms or legal aid service places, they're afraid to say something because guess what? Or even other consulting firms, because it's like if you're the one who's like, oh, I'm burnt out, they're gonna be like, oh, you're like you get like iced out and you get like blacklisted almost. So it is something that we cannot like have people be fearful about. That's just so silly and it's wrong, right? And we have to understand that when we bring people to a burnout stage, or if we get there, it's hard to come back from that. And so your ability to lead suffers. Your organization will suffer if you have a lot of people within it that are burnt out. So you have to understand that, yeah, absolutely. Any collective, any business, any organization has goals and objectives, but how can you get there while still being humane in the process, right? By not just humane, but human, and making space for that, and actively checking for that, not waiting until you hear, hey, I think Susie over there is not doing too well. No, you should be able, if you are a true leader who looks at their own shadow, and is self-aware of their own wellness state and status, you should be doing it with your staff or your collective as well, because when you see the red flags happening, you can come up with a more proactive strategy for that. So, yeah.
That was excellent. I felt like I needed to hear that. Yeah. Remember,
I wrote it in the chat box, but for those of you who aren't paying attention, feel free to type any questions in the chat box, and we can either answer them.
did you turn on the mic? Just so.
Come on live. Oh, are people hearing what I'm saying?
I don't think
No.
so.
No.
Did you do the thing
Did
over there?
you slide up your volume button thingy?
Well, right. Carl is teaching me, reminding me how to do
Yeah.
that. Sorry, I was talking, but no one was hearing me.
Ask if they can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
No. Let's.
Alexandra, yes or no?
No.
No. Okay. Number 2, I thought.
Yeah. It might be, but you could try now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
Alexander is
Okay.
nodding.
Thank you. Thanks for being my go-to face there, Alexandra. Okay, so if anyone has questions, feel free to put them in the chat box, or you can even unmute yourself and just start speaking if you want. And while you're thinking, if you have a question, I wanted to follow up on something you said that I thought was really powerful. We kind of just kept moving, and I was like, oh no, I want to go back to that. You referenced that you think a lot of the kind of structures, systems, paradigms that exist are starting to implode. And I wonder how, as a leader, that is exciting to you, and like what you feel your contribution to that detonation, implosion, and like what gets built next can be.
Love it. Answer to one of your questions, yes, I am very excited about that. So again, it's, if I'm a political science major, so a lot of things are about like cycles, right? Like systems rising, countries rising, and then kind of going a cycle of going down and like either being obliterated or obliterating others, right? Like, so there's a cycle to that, right? What we have seen, what I believe we've seen and are seeing now are, and again, I think COVID was an accelerant of all that, but you see, systems like the finance system, the healthcare system, law itself, at least here in the US, but I see it in Europe somewhat as well. A lot of these systems that we have, like I said, we all have grown up in and have been raised in, I think are at the brink of shaking so much right now that some of these major ones are going to collapse. I believe that's where we're headed. So the question and the people that I love to talk to right now in this moment is, what should be next? Like, what should because a lot of, depending on who you talk to, I don't care if it's here, Latin America, Africa, Europe, Asia, a lot of people a lot of us will say most of our systems are fucked up. They're not equitable, right? Like somebody always suffers. Some group of people always suffers, right? So I always say, okay, well, if you could build a whole new system, who should be part of it, right? Who should implement it? Who should execute it? Who should protect it, right? And what would it look like? And so what I believe, Mara, these next 5 years are going to be is about what new systems are going to, because there will have to be something. Some of these are literally going to, I think we will see something very interesting and very big in our lifetime still. So I want to be ready to talk to those who will be the ones in those new leadership positions, right, of the collective. And really start thinking about, okay, well, what would a more equitable system look like, you know? And one of my law school friends, who actually will be on the call in 2 hours, said something interesting. She's also an attorney, also identifies as Black and as a woman. She said, Carla, you know what? I'm tired of patching up the slave ship. We need to build spaceships. What she means by that, as an attorney, especially a Black one and a woman, we are part of an industry, of a profession, especially in the US, that is basically one of the main tools of inequities and oppression, right, in this country. And so doing DEI work, right, or doing any type of work like that feels like we're, like I said, like, you know, what the fuck are we doing? We're literally putting like Band-Aids on this sinking ship, right, on systems that we know were built inequitably and work very well. You know, people are like, Carl, systems are broken. I'm like, no, the systems are doing exactly what they were designed to do, right? But we are now, you know, be that in the 50s, be that now, every generation has always tried to kind of recalibrate or repatch up certain parts of these systems we know are not equitable. So really what she's saying, I would rather put energy and brain power into imagining what a spaceship would look like, right? Something that is inclusive, something that is done by the collective, imagined and brought into the world by the collective, which is collaborative, which is communal, not competitive, like capitalism or like, you know, the patriarchy or anything like that. It's really understanding that the way forward, in my opinion, and most intuitives and most women leaders say that, you know, the systems that will survive these next 5 years and that will become more of the norm going forward. In you know, I don't care if we talk environment, healthcare, education, or whatever that may be, will be more communal, will be more about the collective rather than one group making decisions for others. I mean, it's interesting to see how, you know, other countries right now are dealing with confronting their colonizers, right? Like there's just we see a lot of different things that are going to the same core and root right now. So that's why I think there's a shakeup right now happening, a shifting of the foundation that lends itself to the opportunity to build new systems. So yes, I'm very excited. In terms of my contribution, that's a good one. When I was talking to my career coach / co-priestess, if you will, you know, what's my role in this, right? I spend most of my days on Zooms or in offices with usually white guys, you know, talking about their shadows and their fear of not knowing how to lead their organization through DEI, right? Do I believe that these leaders will be there in 5 years? No, probably not. So really all I'm doing right now is trying to stabilize these workplaces as best as I can to make it safer for people who look more like me or who are more underrepresented in these organizations. But what I would rather do, my contribution would be to ready the new leaders, right? Because I believe the leaders, the people we call leaders 5 years from now will not look and be the same ones that we have seen probably through most of our lifetime. So it's about having to activate and support those leaders because they are up against having to do something completely different than that they have probably ever seen and that we have ever seen. Yes. How I will help them, I have no clue. But I'll figure it out.
Thank you. Well, I've one final thing I want to speak to. Speaking of the new generation of leaders, you're part of, the One Solution ecosystem, very involved with the Rebels for Peace. They just had the previous session, and you see this potential of youth leadership and all across the board, just a different mind.
Yes.
Like young people just have a different mind, and they do things differently, and they don't accept things that are the way it is.
Yes.
So a lot of what you say is actually very hopeful. It's like the opposite of like, oh, everything's going to shit. No, like these new people, both like culturally, but it also seems like they're born a little bit like just different, like a cycle of a way of being and moving around the world.
Yes.
Which is very hopeful, which also like speaks to like our role more being in support of that rather than keeping on with what we're doing, which is like an interesting thing to consider. When you think of youth leaders and when you think of like the Rebels for Peace, like can you speak to like what about that like inspires you and why you want to be part of it and the potential you see for that to grow in the future?
Definitely. I think one beautiful thing about, and in my family, there are 5 of us. I'm the oldest. Between me and the next one, there's a 7-year gap. So they are all much younger than me. I have a 20-year-old sister as well. I'm 40. I just turned 43. So just to tell you the span of ages. But what I'm seeing, and when I work with our clients and they talk about the millennials, like it's almost like said like as with disdain, like the millennials, like within their organizations. It always makes me chuckle because I'm like, we wish we were like that. Like when I am in women leadership panels and they're like, well, I mean, you wouldn't believe these millennials, they come in, they asking me during the interview whether we have a DEI committee or if there are wellness or like self-care days that they got part of their benefits, and we're like, we would have never asked those questions, right? They just told us, okay, when can I start? And even if the pay was inequitable, we still took the job and all that stuff. And so the beauty, and not for us to like check out, right? Like, yes, these new generations obviously are going to carry that stuff forward, but we have to be part of that, right? But the beauty is that they have less, I mean, don't get me wrong, they have programs and narratives and trauma that they have, right? But I think ours have been so much more powerful in keeping things stuck, right? When I look at my generation, like our generation, our parents is, and as they are phasing out, right, and seeing what this new generation just already understands from get-go, like it doesn't even have to be told to them, that is beautiful, right? And so, when I first met you all, right, like in this very building, I think, across the street, and you told me about your work and you told me about Rebels for Peace, who are like my brothers, my little brothers and sisters, but seeing their ability to have so much less crap on their lenses than you and I have because of the generations that we grew up, makes me very hopeful, right? And that's why we can't stop. So even then, when I have my days of like, oh, why the fuck am I even trying? Like that's why, right? Mm-hmm. Like even when I have a moment or a month of feeling like that, I know that we have people like Rebels for Peace. We have folks in the younger generations who are still very actively putting things together and much faster and better than us, much more collaborative than myself. And I even see this between my siblings and the things that the people that my siblings bring together for any type of efforts, be that economic, be that political, be that anything, much faster and much more inclusive of more people than I would have reached out to, right? So it is important to me that part of supporting leaders is being part of organizations such as yours, and in whatever capacity I can. If I can't do it financially, I do it with my time, right? But we are still, and that's why I think it is important, even if we don't know where to start. Like you wake up and watch the news, you're like, I don't know where to start. I always am happy that I have you now, because I can do something here, right? Like I can. And I tell people who kind of feel the same as me, I'm like, donate to One Solution Global, okay? Like you can start there because again, even if you are strapped for time, bandwidth, energy, Even if you're burnt out, there are folks who are already on there, right? Like that already do the work. So support. So that's kind of how I see that, especially in the moments when I'm the most tired and most hopeless. This is what reminds me. All right, I'm gonna sit down for a little bit. I'll do my self-care, but come back. And then also that people know, if you are just like me, or if you don't know where to start, here's a great place, great people to start supporting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. What is unique in the One Solution approach to organizational change? I think we've been speaking about it, that I think listening but also being comfortable challenging what isn't working. It's like, it's not even being brave. It's like, I really felt like really hopeful about what you were saying. Like, really, like, it's easy to think about organizations as something stuck and it's been like this forever, but like, I think if you bring a belief of like things are moving, it's changing, we're part of it, and we're more inviting organizations to be part of it if they want. Because it's happening, and the people that want will join it, and if not, the world is kind of collectively moving in that direction anyway.
Yeah.
So it's less pressure to try to convince, less pressure to try to like, it's all changing and it's not all on us in a way. But at the core of it, it's changing what, kind of different name, consciousness, changing how we view and perceive things, changing things at the core. And when we change, like we said, when leaders change, everything on how we run an organization change, including policies, including all tangible metrics. And I think that happens on an organizational level, and it happens on a systems level too, but we're not talking about it that way. We're talking about only the metrics, not like what is producing this, what is behind all of this. And if we look at what's behind all of this, it's way more leveraged to do something about it.
Yeah.
It's just we're not used to looking at that. We're used to looking at effects and symptoms, like you said, and then we get stuck in a lifetime of dealing with them rather than what's behind them. And I think that's at the core of them. You can do that in infinite ways. We have our way of doing it, but that's the direction. And I think for the people on the call, it's like you can do that in your style, your way, on topics and interests that you care about, that you embody, that you live by, that you feel true to. But we got to go upstream. And once we go upstream, everything you do else would follow. So that's what I would say. We'll discuss more in future sessions, but that's what I would respond to that question.
Well, the only thing I would add to what you just shared is what's unique about how we work with organizational change is what Aiden said, like we're always looking at human consciousness as the starting point for any change, and being bold and unabashed about like, if this doesn't change, nothing out there in your organization is going to change, and it needs to be all.
Oh, she can't
Oh,
see
you can't. You got to turn on the thing again. No. Yeah, you take this.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry, I was just saying that when we work with an organization, we're always starting from the understanding that if human consciousness doesn't shift, nothing in the external world can change in any real, meaningful, or sustainable way. So, like, when we're working with organizations, we're bold about that being the source of change, the starting point. And so we directly engage with individuals and groups in an organization looking to how do we help them have a shift of consciousness, how to touch something deeper within themselves. But to all the points that Carla just spoke really beautifully to, what I'm most excited about recently is that we do that with the help of the Rebels for Peace that you saw in the last session. So when we work with, we didn't get into that today, but that the Rebels work in schools with younger kids, but they also work with us with organizational teams and leaders with adults because of all the things Carla just said, that they have this amazing ability to see things from a very different mindset. They have not bought into a lot of the systems and ideas that we were raised with. So they kind of have this very free, vulnerable, no bullshit way of neutrally talking about the human mind and the thoughts that we get stuck in and the ways in which we create separation and divisiveness. That's very refreshing and extremely disarming. So when we work with organizations, that's what I would say has become our most unique offering, is that companies are used to consultants or people that look and sound like them coming in, or maybe they look a little bit different, but at least they're the same age, or they've got some, to your point, Carla, some fancy credentials in front of or after their name. And it's like to have Dejan, Melina, whoever show up and talk to them about the mind, about human consciousness, about our connectedness. There's a bit of a, whoa, I wasn't expecting this kind of thing that happens that is very beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's very nourishing and it's freeing. And as an adult, I see other adults just go like, oh my gosh, this is so refreshing. This is so different. And it touches them, and people want to be touched. And that's actually probably the biggest accelerant to change, is people getting touched. So I just wanted to add to what Adik said about your question, Yael. Sorry, I keep messing up the sound.
Gary says, during metamorphosis, the imaginal cells divide rapidly. At first, these are treated as invaders and attacked by the caterpillar's immune system. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about my butt. Yeah, Yael says, thank you. Do you want to say something about it? Okay. All right. Well, we're at time now. We're over, yeah. So, thank you so much for everyone participating. Thank you, Carla, so much for giving your time, energy, presence, and for speaking your truth. We will take a break until 2 o'clock. So we got about 10 minutes, just a quicker break now. And then Alf Pilla is coming on, and we're going to talk about accelerating new solutions from an environmental perspective and nature. So please come in the next session, and we'll see you in 10 minutes. Thank you.